Here's the question. How do you make the impossible possible? Simple. Remove the I am, the ego. Now, how do you step into that newfound possibility? With a series of small intentional steps. Never forget, the greatest among us started from humble beginnings. But to truly unlock your potential, realize you're here for something greater. If you're yearning for more than just a good life, let's take that small step together to reach greatness. Welcome to the Greatness from Small Beginnings podcast, where we're talking to those who have gone from mediocrity to motivated, overlooked to overachieving, forgettable to unforgettable. Are you ready? Let's go. Hello. As you know, this is the Greatness from Small Beginnings podcast, and I am going to do another solo today. Thank you for all those that are listening. I just heard a friend of mine, Rick, that has been listening, and I really appreciate that. Hopefully, and he said, well, only when you say good stuff. And hopefully that is actually the case, that you hear some good things now and then that are encouraging and uplifting and motivating. Zig Ziglar, one of my favorites, always said, motivation is like showering. You need to do it every day. So I appreciated that one too. I am going to do something different today. Usually I dialogue and take a thought and kind of dissect it, but I'm going to read something today that I read recently, and it fits with where I am in my life right now in the season of the year. Look at my last episode and you'll find out that I was asking you all for some help. Like, man, this is hard time of year. And how do I do it better? How do I finish this part of the year strong? And then the 100+ days that are left in the year, how do I finish those strong too? Well, has something to do with perseverance. Let me read this, and then I'll tell you where I got it, what book I got it from. It's about perseverance. Hopefully I can read this so that it's easy to understand, because sometimes I'm reading, I get caught up in the thoughts that I'm looking at. And anyway, I hope I don't do that too much in this case. It's about perseverance. The word really says it all. We've all been there. Nothing seems like it's working. The slump continues. Frustration, anxiety. For me, it's this gut feeling that, oh man, I'm missing something. I'm too busy to catch it all. I'm setting myself up for some kind of failure, and then I get a little bit of gut anxiety that says, "Oh no, here it comes." Often it doesn't, but that's my physiological response to that kind of stress. Continuing, the slump continues. Discouragement envelops every pore of your body. No light shines at the end of the tunnel. The tunnel is collapsed. Of course, this is all us fabricating something in our lives. Perseverance becomes an act of your will against logic and common sense. Boy, I agree. I resonate with that. Against all odds, you summon the strength to take one more step. That's what this reading is about. Pat Manson was an amazing athlete and student, a college student. He's very disciplined and coachable athlete. It was an Olympic year. His best friend and training partner, Scott, another pole vaulter, and I, that the author mentioned earlier, he was injured. During that time, Pat was surging during the indoor season. He led the Grand Prix series for professional track and field for the vault. The winner of the series, which includes the entire indoor season, would receive a huge cash bonus. The series was set to accumulate in a few weeks at the National Indoor Championship. Pat showed at my office asking if we could talk. He looked troubled. I congratulated him on the consistent top 5 performances each week. Then he'd been leading in the Grand, and then he was leading in the Grand Prix. Then I asked him what was troubling him. His response was telling. He said he was having a good season, finished high each week, but he said finishing high wasn't his goal. He wanted to win. He hadn't won a big meet. He said the little holdback in his game, which helped him with consistency, yes, but it held him back from knowing just how high he could jump. He basically was saying he had a risk aversion. He didn't know how to let it go, how to find out what his true potential was to take a risk, to take the risk. For a few weeks, we met and discussed everything I've covered in this book, the author's writing in this book, uh, concepts of writing yourself an audacious letter, becoming friendly with yourself, setting goals based on those things. I asked him to write about each concept and expound how each was relevant in his situation. He was committed. A few weeks into it was the final week, the week of the national championship. This was our targeted meet. And for him to compete on a new plane, letting it all go. Our final meeting was on Wednesday at 10 a.m. Our final topic would be perseverance. However, tragedy struck as Pat was attempting a practice vault during the day on Tuesday. His fiberglass pole broke. The bottom portion caught him between the eyes, slashed his face and scalp all the way to the bone, from his forehead to the back of his head. He was rushed unconscious to the hospital by emergency medical services. He had lost a lot of blood and possibly broken his neck or back. He was going into shock, so they air transported him to the trauma center, and it happened to be in Kansas City. I didn't hear about the accident until Wednesday at 9 a.m. During a class that I was, let's see, where one of the track athletes let me know this guy was teaching a class. I finished the class early and canceled all my appointments in an effort to get to the hospital. I was about to rush out of the office when there was a knock on my door. I opened it. And there was an almost unrecognizable young man. He had a turban of gauze around his head. His eyes were nearly swollen shut. It was Pat, keeping his 10 o'clock appointment. He came in and told me the story. He said he suffered no broken bones and only a slight concussion. This was back before concussion protocols. He said the doctor tied his head together with rope, which included 32 stitches. I asked him why he was smiling. He explained that he had a plan. He wanted to go to the meet with 32 stitches in his head, win the national championship, be able to tell the story of how he'd been talking, what we had been talking about really worked. I was wondering about a waiver at that point. Pat added that the doctor told him the stitches wouldn't break, the swelling would go down in a day, and that he could use Advil for the pain. Pat said he planned not to take any warm-up jumps and just wait until the bar went up to around 18 feet. Then he would enter and win with just a few vaults. I let him share the plan, knowing the chance of him being cleared by his parents, doctors, and meet directors would be nearly insurmountable. But guess what? Pat persevered. He persuaded them all to let him try it. At 18 feet, he entered the event looking like Frankenstein. He made it in his first attempt, and as he did the next height, it came down to one other competitor and Pat. The bar was set at his personal record and the stadium and meet record of 18 feet, 8 and 1/4 inches. With the crowd behind him, he made it on his first attempt. His competitor made it on his third attempt. The bar was raised to a new personal record, a new stadium record, and a new meet record of 18 feet, 11 and 1/4 inches. On Pat's first attempt, he made it. His competitor missed his 3 attempts. Pat won the national championship with 32 stitches in his head. How was that humanly possible? The tunnel had caved in. There was no light. Pat chose not to lie in the hospital bed while his dreams and chances for greatness passed him by. He took a step, then another, then made a plan. He persevered. We never got to talk about perseverance. He just went and lived it. Here's the question for you. Are there steps in your life now that are requiring you to persevere? There are some in mind, that is for certain. Name them, make a decision to take another step, and then another, then another. Greatness could be just a few steps away. This podcast name Greatness from Small Beginnings. The small beginnings is us not knowing exactly how it's going to go and yet stepping into it anyway. Greatness might mean persevering through super difficult times. Maybe even today. Maybe even as you're listening to this. Maybe it's not happenstance. Maybe it's just not circumstance that you're listening to this today. Whenever you're listening to it, is that you needed it somehow so that you can persevere the next thing, make the next step or two, and then follow that with a plan that lays out the continued number of steps that it takes to be great doing the thing you're doing. Do I have that issue in my life? Yes, I sit here currently with a knot in my stomach because there's so much going on, and not all of it is positive. Some of it is not between me and others, but relationally, there's tons of issues going on inside of our company. I'm stewing over some things regarding an organization I'm part of, and there's a lot to think about. But that doesn't mean I don't persevere and make plans and especially take the next step. All right. That was a short podcast, but here, let me finish it the way I always do. Quoting once again, Zig Ziglar about you. You were designed for accomplishment, engineered for success, and endowed with the seeds of greatness. I saw a video from a gal yesterday that on Instagram, and I really like her, a young gal. I interviewed her on this her and her husband on this podcast episode. My goodness, I don't know, prior to 10, I don't remember. It's been a ways back. It was back in January, and she did one on a 12-day challenge, and the first day was self-awareness. And I realized that I am around so many people. It's easy, of course, to reflect on others. I'm around so many people that lack awareness, advanced awareness of their situation, of how they affect it and how they affect others, and how they could improve in those moments. And I was reflecting, of course, on others, and then I realized that, well, what about me? And it was a good thought. It was a very good thought. And that is kind of the flip of the coin from this Zig Ziglar quote, is that we have to have self-awareness. We have to see, number one, that yes, we were built for this. We were built for greatness. But the other side of it is we have to be aware of how we can be great, of course, but then aware of how we aren't in some areas. And that is a choice that we have to make, is to be that aware. So go make that choice, huh? There's one of the action points finishing up. I'll read it again. You were designed for accomplishment, engineered for success, and endowed with the seeds of greatness. Now here's the call to action that I give every week. Now go be great. It's your choice.